It is now time for my number one favorite way to evaluate cryptocurrency projects, and that is the GitHub repository or whatever open source code repository that these projects use. Because again, one of the biggest goals I had with trying to figure out valuation metrics, methodologies for cryptocurrency projects was because I come from a traditional finance background. And this is the one little diamond in the rough in terms of evaluation that I would have never guessed, because it's not something that I would have ever used to look at a traditional company to evaluate a traditional stock and its value. This is something that is very unique to the open source, decentralized cryptocurrency, blockchain industry, if you will, or new arena of technology. Because a lot of these projects, like I've alluded to, are open source, which means they don't run off of very tightly held proprietary information where a big centralized company is hiring people to work on the technology and making sure that other people don't get to see it or access it or potentially steal their ideas. This environment and this culture, and one of the things I love about cryptocurrency and blockchain the most, at least the originals, it's the antithesis of that old model. It is open source, worldwide, democratic. Like when I say open source, I mean open source. So anybody who wants to develop on it from around the world that has enough knowledge about the code and the project and access to a GitHub repository, which you don't need anything but a login to have access and an internet connection to have access, then they can go on and help provide new code and push new code to this repository, make new section or new suggestions to these projects on a regular basis. And so I feel one of the ways that I think that adds value, and one of the ways that I used it to evaluate the health of a project, and again, it became my favorite, was I would go into each project's respective GitHub repositories. And mind you, for some of these projects, there are more than one code repository. Mind you, they're not all necessarily on GitHub, majority are, but I would find their most robust repository, the one that's going to have the most action on it. And I would see, relative to all the other top 25 coins, how many commits, how many code commits are happening in this repository? How many have happened total? And when the last time a commit happened? Because sometimes there were projects that were really hot out the gates and had a lot of commits to their repository. But if you look at the date of the last submitted one, it was months ago. And to me, that's a red flag. That's something that I don't necessarily want to invest in a project that isn't being actively developed on and doesn't have that excitement from the developer community. Because I think a lot of people that have, somewhat of a computer science background will tell you, if a project's not being innovated on a consistent basis, you're not going to stay competitive. I think that's more of a business thing than anything else. And security-wise, that can be an issue. Like if people are finding bugs and exposing bugs about your platform, and you're not going in and having people constantly go in and be able to fix that, that can be a big problem and a big point of vulnerability. And if your platform and your project do end up getting attacked, obviously that's going to have an effect on people's ability to want to invest in it, therefore its ability to affect value, which is one of the reasons why I put it in here. So look at how many commits are going on in a repository and look at when the last commit was. I also, on a slightly more superficial level, we'll look at the stars that are there, because it's almost like the developers being able to go in and like a repository. And so I think that does say something. If people that have more computer science knowledge than I have and more developer knowledge than I have are going in and saying, hey, this is actually a really solid code base, I'm going to star it, I'm going to like it, I'm going to endorse it, that did carry some weight for me as well. So bottom line, this became, like I said, one of my favorites. Go in if you're looking into investing into a project, or maybe you are an open source developer and you want to figure out like the best projects to spend your energy on. This, I'm sure you already would know this, but this is a really great way to do that. So check out the GitHub repositories, check out the open source code repositories, and yeah, hopefully that helps you in your process as well. One quick little bit that I forgot to mention with the rest of it, but over time I started to notice, and another thing that raised little potential red flags for me is when I would go into a repository and see that there actually weren't a lot of commits happening. There wasn't a lot of new code being committed and being developed on. However, a ton of people were going in and starring the repository. So if the ratio of stars to commits is really heavily favoring the stars over the commits, to me, again, that's a red flag that people are going in, almost building like a castle in the air, so to speak, saying, hey, yeah, we love this project, but there's not the integrity of the code to help back that up. So just be aware of that too. Just because it has a lot of likes and stars doesn't mean it's earned them. So once upon a time, when the crypto markets were still relatively new, I felt like Alice in Wonderland. I was traditionally had a finance background, but this was all very new and exciting. And it was a market that didn't have understood valuation metrics. Like in traditional finance, you have all kinds of ratios to help you evaluate whether or not a certain stock is worth its value. But in cryptocurrency, especially in the early days, that didn't exist. So I went in and tried to make some sense out of Wonderland, so to speak. So for the past few years, majority of the quarters over the past few years, I have pulled the top 25 market cap data from coinmarketcap.com and evaluated each one, stacking it against my theories of how to determine value for these coins and for these projects. And it really has been helpful over time. I've gotten to realize a lot of projects that really deserve more consideration for investment, as well as others that quickly rose to the top 25 via that good old hype train, but likely didn't have the intrinsic value and integrity that it took to stay there. But now that my evaluation metrics, as well as the crypto markets in general, are a lot more established, I no longer plan on pulling all top 25 and running the numbers every single quarter. Instead, I'm going to continue to use these metrics that have worked well for me over time, but I'm going to do it on more of an as-wanted basis when deciding between potentially good and bad investments that I've been curious about. So if you are watching this video from my website, then feel free to scroll down in each respective section and you'll get to see examples of past data pulls that I've done and the merits behind them and how it has helped determine value over time. If you're not watching this video from my website, then there will be a goodie bag full of links in the description section so you can be directed to these respective places to check out past data pulls. And yeah, feel free to use these methods and hopefully they can help your due diligence process. But please keep in mind that they are some of many, emphasis on the word many, ways to conduct due diligence and to do your research on investments that you might not only want to put money into, but maybe time. In the case of being an open source developer, that's your time and your development effort is a very precious resource too. So I would say spend it wisely, do it on projects that are really going to be worth it over time. And at the end of the day, like with everything, it's all done at your own risk, but I still hope that these are as helpful for you as they have been for me in terms of shedding light on evaluating these projects. And I wish you the best of luck on your crypto endeavors. And P.S. that this Alice clip is going to be placed at the end of each how to evaluate crypto video in order to give it a little more context. So in the future, if you've hit this point in the video and you're late for a very important date, then feel free to skip it because you won't have missed anything new.